The last known sighting of Emily Carter was on a chilly October evening in Seattle. Security footage showed her leaving Kavanaugh's Cafe at exactly 8:42 p.m., her long coat wrapped tightly around her, blonde hair tucked behind her ear as she adjusted the strap of her purse. She walked a few paces down the sidewalk. Then the footage cut off. No additional cameras captured where she went next, no witnesses came forward. Just like that, Emily was gone. Detective Daniel Foster stood in her dimly lit apartment, his fingers running over the rim of a half-empty coffee cup left on the counter. It was still there, untouched since she had last been home. Her keys rested in their usual spot near the door. Her car remained parked outside, but Emily? She had seemingly vanished into thin air. Her fiancé, Jake Reynolds, had reported her missing early the next morning when she never came home. "I knew something was wrong the second she didn't answer my calls," he said, his voice thick with worry. "She never ignores me. Never." Daniel had heard that before, but as he studied the apartment, no signs of struggle, no forced entry. Something gnawed at him. Emily wasn't the type to disappear. She was meticulous, organized, the kind of person who planned out her week down to the minute. And yet, here they were. "Did she mention meeting anyone that night?" Daniel asked. Jake shook his head. "She just said she was grabbing coffee before heading home. That was it." Daniel checked Emily's phone records. Her last known call had been at 8:25 p.m. to an unknown number. He dialed it. Disconnected. That was the first real clue that something was off. Then came another. When he reviewed the cafe's footage one more time, something stood out. A man, sitting alone at a corner table, watching Emily as she left. He never ordered anything, never looked at his phone, just sat there, eyes fixed on her. And the moment she stepped out the door, he got up and followed. The case had just taken a darker turn. A week had passed since Emily Carter vanished, and the case had gone cold, until something strange happened. Her credit card was used. Detective Daniel Foster stood in the back office of a gas station just outside Reno, Nevada, staring at grainy security footage from the register. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. A woman in a gray hoodie approached the counter. She slid a credit card forward without a word. The clerk swiped it, handed her the receipt, and she signed. Then, for a brief moment, her hood slipped back. Daniel's stomach twisted. It was Emily. But something was wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her movements sluggish, like she was exhausted or drugged. When the clerk asked if she needed anything else, she mumbled, I need to get back home." Then she left. The gas station clerk, a middle-aged man named Henry, leaned back in his chair. "She gave me the creeps, man, like she wasn't really there, you know? She just grabbed a bottle of water and walked back to a car waiting outside. Some guy was in the driver's seat." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Did you get a look at him?" Henry shook his head. "Nah." He kept his face turned away from the cameras, but the car was black. SUV, I think? No plates. Daniel examined the receipt Emily had signed. The signature was jagged, almost hesitant, but something else stood out. "This isn't her handwriting," Jake said when Daniel showed him. "That's not how she signs her name." Daniel compared it to her driver's license signature. Jake was right. Someone else had signed for her. Which raised the bigger question, why make her use the card at all? If this was an abduction, why risk exposure? Why take Emily into public, let her interact with people, leave a digital trail, unless they wanted to send a message? Emily had been missing for a week. She was still alive. But for how much longer? The motel was the kind of place where people went to disappear. Off a quiet highway outside Reno, the Bluebird Inn had peeling paint, flickering neon lights, and a reputation for asking no questions. Detective Daniel Foster leaned against the front desk, flipping through the guest ledger. No Emily Carter. No Jake Reynolds. No obvious aliases. But then the manager, a gruff man in a stained undershirt, pointed at a different log. "She was here, room 14, came in late, paid cash." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Was she alone?" The manager hesitated. "No, Some guy was with her, tall, dark jacket, kept his head down. Daniel frowned. Did she look like she was in distress? The manager scratched his head. Not exactly, but she wasn't chatty either. She had this faraway look, like she wasn't fully there. She signed the check-in slip, but her hand was shaking real bad. He slid the slip across the counter. The signature was jagged, just like the gas station receipt. Daniel's jaw tightened. Someone was controlling her. Surveillance footage showed a black SUV pulling into the lot around 2 a.m. The man got out first, glancing around before opening the passenger door. Emily hesitated but followed. Her posture was tense, her movements slow. She clutched her hoodie close, like she was trying to disappear into it. Did she try to leave? Daniel asked. The manager sighed once, stepped outside the room, looking around like she wanted to run. But then he came out and grabbed her arm real tight, whispered something to her. She went back inside without a fight. Daniel's fists clenched. Whoever this man was, he had a hold over Emily. But was it fear? Manipulation? Something worse? By morning they were gone. The bed was unmade. The only thing left behind was a half-empty bottle of water and a napkin with a scribbled word on it. Home. Daniel stared at it. Did Emily write this, or was it a message from her captor? One thing was clear. She wasn't just being taken somewhere, she was being led. And he needed to find out why. Detective Daniel Foster had spent years solving disappearances, but this case was different. Emily Carter wasn't just missing, she was being led somewhere by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And the answer, it seemed, was buried in her past. The break came when Daniel traced Emily's old connections and found someone unexpected, her estranged sister, Laura Carter. It took 2 days to track her down to a small apartment in Sacramento. When he knocked, she opened the door just wide enough to peek out, her face pale. Emily's missing, Daniel said, and I think it has something to do with your past. Laura stiffened. What past? You lived in Reno as kids. Laura's grip tightened on the doorframe. That was a long time ago. Daniel stepped closer. Emily was last seen there, staying in a motel, acting strange. She left behind a napkin with the word home written on it. I think someone is leading her back to something she tried to forget. For a moment, Laura said nothing. Then she let out a slow, shaky breath. Our parents, they were involved with dangerous people. They owed money, big money, to a man named Vincent Cade. He ran an underground operation, smuggling, extortion, the kind of guy who made people disappear. Daniel's chest tightened. And Emily? She saw something, Laura whispered. When she was 6 years old, she saw Vincent kill a man. Our parents tried to keep her quiet, but it messed her up. Nightmares, sleepwalking. And then, one day, a man came to our house, said she had to forget what she saw. A week later, my parents packed us up and left Reno. We never went back. Daniel's mind raced. And now, all these years later, someone is forcing her to remember. Laura nodded. Vincent disappeared a decade ago, but if someone's bringing Emily back to Reno, it means he's still out there. Daniel's stomach churned. This wasn't a random abduction. It was a message. Emily wasn't just being taken. She was being returned, and whatever waited for her at the end of this road was something she might not survive. The woods were eerily quiet as Detective Daniel Foster and his team approached an abandoned trailer on the outskirts of Reno. The location had been flagged from a burner phone registered to Emily Carter, a single ping sent just hours ago. The place reeked of gasoline and decay. The door was slightly ajar, swinging lazily in the cold wind. Daniel pulled his gun and stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The interior was trashed. Furniture overturned, old newspapers scattered across the floor, but what stopped him cold was the single piece of paper pinned to the wall with a rusty knife. He knows I remember. Daniel's throat tightened. Emily had been here, recently, and she was terrified. Clear, one of the officers called from the back. No sign of Emily. No captor, just an empty space filled with dread. Then, from outside, the crunch of gravel. Daniel spun just as a car engine roared to life. He bolted out the door in time to see a black SUV tearing down the dirt road. He aimed, fired 2 shots. One cracked the taillight, but the vehicle disappeared into the night. "Damn it!" he growled, lowering his weapon. He had been seconds too late. He turned back toward the trailer, trying to steady his breathing. Emily had been here. Left a message. But what exactly did she remember? Laura's words echoed in his head. Emily witnessed something as a child, something their parents buried. And now someone was trying to drag her back into it. His phone buzzed. It was the forensics team. "We found something," the voice on the other end said. "DNA results from the motel room confirm Emily was there, but we also pulled another sample." Daniel's stomach turned. "Whose?" A pause. Then, "Vincent Cade." Daniel went rigid. The man Emily saw kill someone all those years ago. The man who was supposed to be dead. But he wasn't. Vincent Cade was alive, and now he had Emily. The air inside the abandoned warehouse was thick with dust and gasoline. A single dim bulb swung from the ceiling, casting jagged shadows along the rusted beams. Detective Daniel Foster stepped forward, his gun raised, heart pounding. Somewhere in this place, Emily Carter was waiting, if she was still alive. A faint sound echoed, a muffled whimper. Daniel followed the noise, careful not to give away his position. He turned a corner and saw her. Emily sat on the cold concrete floor, wrists bound, her face pale and streaked with dirt, her blue eyes locked onto his, wide with a mix of fear and relief. "Emily," he whispered. Before he could move, another voice cut through the darkness. "You should have stayed away, Detective." Daniel tensed. From the shadows, a man stepped forward. Vincent Cade. The ghost, the man who was supposed to be dead. Cade was older now, his face lined with years of survival, but his cold, calculating stare hadn't changed. He held a pistol, aimed squarely at Daniel. "You were dead," Daniel said, stalling for time. Cade smirked. "No, just forgotten. Like Emily should have been." He tilted his head toward her. "But she remembered, didn't she? Even after all these years." Daniel's mind raced. Emily had seen Cade kill someone as a child, a secret that should have died with her parents. But Cade had never forgotten, and now he was tying up loose ends. "Why now?" Daniel asked. "Why take her after all these years?" Cade's smile faded. "Because she started digging, asking questions, looking for the truth." His grip on the gun tightened. "And the truth gets people killed." A sharp crack shattered the air. Emily kicked her chair back, slamming into Cade's legs. His gun went off, the bullet ricocheting off a metal beam. Daniel fired one shot. Cade collapsed. The warehouse fell silent. Emily trembled as Daniel rushed to untie her. "It's over," he said, his voice steady. She looked at him, her eyes dark, with something deeper than fear. "It'll never be over," she whispered, "because some memories never fade."